Hey, what's going on? Wanted to go ahead and give you all a quick overview of the new example that we're going to be releasing under Truffle Packages. So the name of this game is the Mash Minigame, and it's modeled after the minigame from Mario Party 4, the Domination minigame. Ludwig has played it a lot, and at one point in time he held the world record. And essentially the way that the game works, it's a time-based minigame where players are essentially just mashing a button as many times as they can in the allotted time frame, and whoever presses the button the most wins. And so we wanted to go and convert this into a game that streamers would be able to play with their audience, where streamers would be able to go and start the game, start the clock, and then all the viewers would be button mashing, and then we would be able to go and tap into Truffle's API to show a leaderboard in real time as the results were kind of streamed out. So we'll go and give a quick demo of how that works. So this is the admin dashboard. This is going to be the viewer side over here with the mash button. So if we go over to the admin dashboard, and first of all, we also are using the, I guess the roles and permissioning side of the Truffle API. So there's before you actually get to the screen, there's also a login prompt, and in order to actually go and start this game and call some of the actions that you need to call from the admin front end UI, you have to be logged in as a Truffle admin for the org. So for example, if a user, a viewer that didn't have admin perms in the org, when they found this URL, they wouldn't be able to go and start the game themselves because they didn't have permissions inside of Truffle, which is one of the cool aspects of Truffle. You don't have to manage that yourself, which is really sweet. So if we go and we start the game here, you can see the timer switches over, and then if we go over to the viewer side of things, you can go and click the button. It doesn't show your count until after the end of the round. Your results filtering in. And if we go back to the admin dashboard on the leaderboard, you're going to see that the leaderboard has all the results from the round. And that is basically all the functionality for the actual game. Is fairly simple, but wanted to kind of showcase some of the leaderboard functionality, as well as how you can kind of use OrgUserCounters or user counter types to keep track of a user's score in a pretty simple manner. So that's kind of what's going on. The next thing I'm going to do is show you all a diagram of the two different sides of the flow and kind of walk you through what's going on. So on the admin side, after a user is actually logged in, their Truffle admin, they can go and they can see the admin UI. When they click start, there are a couple of different actions that happen here. So if we go back to our diagram, when a admin starts a round, the first thing it's going to do is going to go and call the Truffle API, and it's going to create a new OrgUserCounter type. This is basically like a model that we use to keep track of score. We use OrgUserCounter types to keep track of stuff like channel points, XP. Really, it's any like sort of counter that you want users to be able to keep track of their score with. And this model also ties into the leaderboard functionality inside of Truffle, where you can go and query for a OrgUserCounter connection and pull in a sorted leaderboard of the results, which is pretty sweet. So that's what's going on in step number one. Right after we create the OrgUserCounter type, the next thing we do is we go and we update a game config using the key value model, and we're going to store the OrgUserCounter type ID as well as the end time of the round. That way the clients on the viewer side can go and they can pull that config and know whether or not a user can still click the button, whether they can still go and get points. And then the third part of the flow, after we've gone and we've updated the config, we're actually going to use the events API to forward the updated config to an edge function, which is going to keep track of the timing of rounds to make sure that if somebody got access to the information for the round, that they wouldn't be able to just go and update their own count in the Truffle API if they had sufficient capabilities using the API. So we have like an additional check that we're going to do to make sure that your everyday viewer wouldn't be able to just go and update this, and that it's going to be driven through the admin dashboard. So when we go through step 3, so we're going to go and call the action execute mutation in the Truffle API, and essentially what's going to be inside of this action is going to be an endpoint for our Supabase function that is going to receive and process the webhook and update a config on the Supabase side. So we're actually using Postgres instead of Supabase to update the config there as well. That way, when viewers are trying to increment their counters, we have a way to check that using Postgres and using Supabase locally there in the function, which is pretty sweet. And so we call that admin start endpoint. Truffle is going to go and forward the metadata that was passed into the execute action, which is going to be the round config. And we also are going to look up the org user that triggered the action. And we're also going to send over their roles and permissions. That way you can go and process those inside of your custom backend, make sure that the user that triggered the action actually has permissions to do whatever functionality that you're trying to handle inside of your function. So that's what's going on there, which is pretty neat. And that's the admin side. Oh, yeah. So the last part, once we verify inside the edge function that it's an admin user, we go and we update the config inside of the local Postgres storage. So that's what's going on the admin flow. And then on the viewer side of the flow, it is a very similar sort of flow where we're driving actions through Truffle to our edge function. That way we can make sure that it is in fact like Truffle users that are invoking this increment action. And that way we can kind of like sort of filter bots from just spamming the edge function directly to increment a user's org user counter. So that's what's going on here. So when you look over at the mashing button, that mashing button is going to be pulling that round config to make sure that there isn't a new round yet, or when it detects that there has been a new round started, it's going to go and open that button up so you can start clicking it, and then it'll go into step number 2 here. Once the round is open, it will actually call that action execute mutation that will forward the event to our edge function. That way the edge function can check, 1, if the round is still active, and then 2, it'll actually call back into the Truffle API using the package API key to update the org user counter for the user. That way, we're not just allowing clients to update the org user counter directly, and can try to limit bots that way. So when we go and we click the action, if we trace through the flow, it's going to trigger a webhook action that's going to forward this event along with the org user for the user that triggered the action execute mutation to the edge function. The edge function verifies that the org user is in fact a Truffle user. Then it looks up the round config from Postgres that was updated in the admin step. And if there is still time remaining in the round, then it's going to go and make an API call to Truffle to update the org user counter. So that's what happens when somebody clicks a button, and that's the way that they're actually awarded points. So that is kind of the flow right now to verify user auth. Anyone can execute an action, so that is by design. That way viewers are able to trigger actions. The nice part of that flow is going through Truffle versus going directly through the edge function is you don't have to worry about authorization on your edge function side for users. So since we're just going to be invoking actions in Truffle and forwarding to the edge function, we're going to be forwarding all their permissioning and role information to the edge function that you can then use to restrict different endpoints and do certain things when that webhook is posted to your custom endpoint. So that is basically it. If you guys have any questions, let us know. Thanks.